which is why I really empathize with the parents. And when I was in therapy with my autistic kids, when I could see that relationship between parent, I always invited parents into my sessions, always.
Yeah.
Um, and so that I could explain things to them and I could involve them in things. And when I could see that relationship strengthen, that made my day. That
Mm.
was my whole goal in doing therapy, was not so that the kid could gain skills, but so that relationship and that bonding would take place.
Hi, I'm Staci Newstat. I am a speech language pathologist and the CEO at Making Sense of Autism, and I'm a student of Susan.
And I'm Susan Golubock. I am a now retired occupational therapist who has worked many, many years after I discovered even my own autism with other autistic individuals. I founded Making Sense of Autism because of my passion to not only understand my brain and how it worked differently, but to try to explain what I've learned to other people so that they're more understanding and therefore more accepting and more accommodating to autistic individuals.
So, our goal is to help you provide the right support without trying to fix autism, but by understanding it. So, whether you're a parent, teacher, therapist, or just someone who wants to learn, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and join us every week. We talk about a new topic. Sue, I've been thinking a lot lately, and definitely talking with my own counselor on this topic because as a parent, I even struggle with that balance, finding that balance. And for me personally, it's between compassion and boundaries. Because personally, I really lean into compassion, and sometimes that means I give and give, and then I'm drained, or I find myself being snappy. And what I've learned is that when I'm out of balance, it's hard for my kids to feel grounded too. And see that I'm inconsistent with my rules. And so it gets confusing to them. Luckily, my husband is amazing with balance and he's really good with the two. So I have that as my model. And like I said, I'm definitely talking with my counselor, working on it with myself. But I know that the families that we work with who have autistic children, finding that balance is even harder because it's understanding how their child views the world. So, from your perspective, when you were a child, how did it feel from the autistic perspective when the adults around you were out of balance?
Well, my mother struggled with depression and also medical issues. So she wasn't always there um, to meet my needs. And my father, he showed signs of being on the spectrum. So he wasn't necessarily emotionally involved. Um, so there's many a day. And the rule was we can be in our bedroom, but we're not to close the door, i.e., she should be able to walk by and see what we're up to. Okay, I get it. But so I would have to deliberately find a spot on the bed that I could sit and rock where she wasn't likely to see me unless she came in so I could alert myself to stop. So it was like I couldn't even be me in my own house, in my own bedroom. Well, of course, I still had to share the bedroom, but my younger sister, who I also then self-identified as being on the autism spectrum, she told me she would often come in and see me sitting there rocking, and she would come and sit there rock with me in empathy.
Oh, wow.
Um, but I really still felt so alone. I mean, I didn't notice that my younger sister was doing the things I was doing because I was so into my own, just trying to self-regulate.
Mhm.
Um, but I had no one to turn to. And that's kind of how I grew up, feeling like I had no one um, in that I could even talk to, that would understand me. And my parents they would always praise me, but only for the things that I did that were typical, the things they
Mhm.
expected from me, what they wanted from me. So when I think it was in third grade, we moved. And that was a big traumatic experience for me.
Mhm.
Um, and so obviously, I had changes in how I behaved. Prior to this, I had learned if I was just good and did what anybody told me to do, I would stay out of trouble. And it was the easiest way to just get rid of people. So they would leave me alone to be me because I couldn't relate to other people. Um, because my mother then said, "What happened to the good girl you used to be?"
Mm.
And that totally crushed me in terms of telling me that if I wasn't compliant and did what people expected of me, that's when I sort of totally lost all sense of self. I totally decided the only way to survive in this world was to do what other people told me to do. And this went into adulthood. I mean, if I was told at a conference, you should stop at this table and do this, I did. And another OT would say, "Well, why? Do you want it?" Well, I don't know. They just told me to. I mean,
Mhm.
all the way through adulthood, look how vulnerable I was in terms of anything someone told me to do. I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. I had no sense of self, no sense of this is the harm that unfortunately I think is happening to a lot of autistics growing up, is that they are trained to be compliant. And then they wonder why 85% of autistic adults are still living with their parents unemployed.
Mhm. And that relationship with your parents, it sounds like both your parents were maybe even kind of struggling. And so, as long as you were the good girl, they were like, okay, we're good. But then, as
It made
soon
life
as,
easier for them too.
right?
Yes,
Yeah,
because my
absolutely.
mother had her own issues to
Mhm.
deal with. And yeah, which is why I really empathize with the parents. And when I was in therapy with my autistic kids, when I could see that relationship between parent, I always invited parents into my sessions, always.
Yeah.
Um, and so that I could explain things to them and I could involve them in things. And when I could see that relationship strengthen, that made my day. That
Mm.
was my whole goal in doing therapy, was not so that the kid could gain skills, but so that relationship and that bonding would take place.
Absolutely. And that's what I want to talk about next. So, as an autistic occupational therapist, when you were working with your families, how could you kind of tell when there was an imbalance between the parents and the children?
When a parent would drop a kid off and insist on going and waiting for them in the waiting room,
Mm.
um, told me they weren't involved. They were doing what they were required to do to help their child, but even though I invited them in, they would be not decline.
Mhm.
Said that bond isn't there.
Mhm.
Um, and also when the light bulb would go on when we were in a session, and I could explain what their child's behavior was telling me, and they could see how when I changed what I did, it changed how they responded, and the light bulb would go on. It was like, yes, they just needed this understanding, um, so that it made sense to them as to how to respond to their child, as opposed to well, I don't understand it. I just want you to comply. So um, there is no problem.
Yeah. And and I think, I definitely saw that when I worked in a clinic where parents wouldn't always come in. And I think a big problem with that started years ago. It was that we would just go get the child. I mean, that's how I was taught in school, over 20 years ago. You go get the child, you work with them, then you take them back out, you explain to the parent. And it's like, how is that good therapy? Um, the parents need to see what we're doing, what works, what doesn't work, because we're not always perfect in therapy either. And so for those parents who feel like they can't go in, this is your permission right now that you can advocate to go in. And that's one side of it. But the other side of it that I would sometimes see is the parents were so dysregulated and they were like, this is my break. And
Mhm.
that's where I feel that imbalance is. And even myself, I know when I am giving and giving and giving and giving, and I'm not getting anything in return, I get exhausted. And
Mhm.
so, what does that look like in the parent or in the child? And how do you guide them to get that balance, especially when the parents are dysregulated too?
Well, for those parents that didn't want to be involved, this was their break time, this was their relief time. What I instead did, rather than my coming out and saying, here's what your child did, here's my report from my perspective as an OT, um, I created, and this is some of the forms that I created for our workshops, is one in which the child was involved in checking themselves. Oh, look what you did. And I would point out to them and then say, oh, we got to go tell your mom this. See, now what I'm doing is I'm working through the child for the child to tell the parent, look what I did. And so then the parent can get involved in saying, oh, oh, they're getting something out of it in terms of the child sharing with them what was important to them,
Mhm.
not to me, but to the child. And the child felt good about it. Um, and I had this one parent that I hadn't even told her that I was working on helping him problem solve. But she then came to me and said, a miracle happened. And she relayed how he dealt with something that he normally would have a meltdown over and then did this time. Um, and she was like, and I said, yeah, I've been deliberately making problems so that we could solve them. And it was like, oh, I mean, the light bulb again would go on saying, yeah, oh, I get it. Now I understand what I could do and what triggered those meltdowns.
Mhm. And that creates a balance because if the
Uh-huh.
child has that skill, the parent isn't consistently trying to figure
Uh-huh.
out how to support them in those meltdowns. And I don't know if you remember when we started beta testing this at the clinic you and I both worked at, one of the therapists had brought up about how one of the parents of an adult autistic non-speaking individual who had just gotten an AAC device, the mom just wanted him to say I love you, um, which every parent wants. And I know that when I hear that from parents, we talk about, modeling, 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 especially on the device. But from the autistic perspective, that's I know that seems more like very surfacey, like if they model it, the child's going to say it, but is there that feeling behind it? So I feel like even that emotional connection of saying I love you brings some of that balance because that's what parents want to hear. So from the autistic perspective, dive into that a little bit more.
Well, okay, I had this child that the goal of the parent was very clearly she would grab their hand and take them to things that she wanted, but never give eye contact. And they so desperately wanted to be acknowledged as, hey, I'm a person, not a thing that you can direct them or manipulate to get what you want. So I worked with her in therapy to show her the need that if she wants something from me, she's going to have to look for me. I would deliberately go outside her line of vision when I knew she was going to ask for more, and she would have to turn around and look at, then I would praise her. You want me? Oh, I'm so excited. This is wonderful. You want me? You were looking at the wall. I thought you wanted the wall to do it. Oh, that's me. Um, and I would emphasize that. So, yes, she very quickly understood the purpose for eye contact makes the other person excited and makes them feel good.
Mhm.
Um, and therefore, now it made sense to her. I taught her the why, even though she was non-speaking. And I'm sorry, I taught her in her own language, which was body language and through experience, why people want that from you.
Yes.
And I had another adolescent, again, non-speaking, why he had no communication system up until that time. I taught him how to communicate to friends, relatives, family through creating greeting cards. He would create the greeting cards and then be able to send them and get a response back. Um, and when I would explain to the mother, again, this was in the early days when the parents stayed outside, and I explained to her why I was doing what I was doing. Um, and I would always end it with, think about it. Think about it. I would challenge her to think about what I said. So after he created these cards and he came back, and the mother was telling me about how he was sending these out and getting responses. And she handed me a card he had made for me. On the front of the card, it said, think about it. On the
Oh,
inside, it said, thank you.
wow. That's amazing.
This is what makes my day
Yeah.
because that relationship, he understood why some of these things are so important to other people. And he could see that I was advocating for his needs, which he wasn't able to advocate for. I asked me to think about from his perspective.
Hmm.
Um, and he had a relationship with his mom, and it was a fairly good one.
Yeah.
But this got the emotional bond
Yeah. Which is what
they're
people
looking
want,
for.
whether you're a
Yeah.
parent, whether you're a friend, absolutely.
Hmm.
That's a great story. So as you can see, we definitely see that importance of balance. And that's why on May 16th, it's a Friday, we're holding a 1 hour parent workshop where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this idea of how to get balance. And we'll also have an opportunity for questions for Susan. So our workshop is You Matter Too, Creating Balance in Your Parent-Child Relationship. It's going to be Friday, May 16th at 12:30 Mountain Standard Time via Zoom. I will put the link below so you can sign up. It is just $10, and we hope that you can join us. There will be a recording so we can send it to you afterwards. Um, but this is such an important thing because when you have that balance, it just relieves that tension. And so if you feel that tension in your body, that means there isn't that balance going on. And don't get me wrong, trust me, it goes up and down and up and down. Some days I'm like, I have a good nervous system today. I can hold my boundaries. And other days I am overwhelmed and I'm like, I don't even care. Just do whatever.
I feel
80
you.
20. 80% of the time I'm pretty good, 20 I'm not. So awesome. Thanks for all of the great stories, Sue.
Thank you for asking, Stacy.